Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Equalizer film, The Equalizer 3. All three of these films have been directed by Antoine Fuqua from the Training Day fame. They've also all starred Denzel Washington, also from Training Day. And with this film, you guys, we find Robert McCall, the character from the first two movies. He's basically traveling abroad in Italy. He's basically vacationing there. He's pretty much been a retired agent ever since the first movie. He's basically just been kind of trying to adjust to a normal life while also helping others that really do kind of need it. And he's still kind of basically pursuing that life in this third movie. So he's traveling abroad in Italy, and there is a bad Italian mafia that he encounters. They happen to be involved with people that he is becoming friends with over in Italy, whether it's this waitress or a police officer or what have you. Basically, all these people that he's becoming friends with. There's a doctor he becomes friends with at one point in this movie. And so they have this trouble with this Italian mafia, and everybody seems to be in some kind of debt with them, whether they owe them money or there's some type of trouble they got into. And so it basically gets to the point where Robert McCall wants to do something about it. He's just really sick and tired of seeing these good people being having their lives ruined by this mafia. And so over the course of this movie, Robert McCall has to take out this mafia one by one, has to find its leader, has to stop kind of all these problems that keep coming up while he's over in Italy. And this is all over the course of Equalizer 3. So overall, guys, I thought this installment was just okay. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the first two Equalizer movies. I thought they were very well done. I thought Antoine Fuqua really brought something to those first two movies that really display his talents well as a filmmaker, really display kind of what he would bring to that Equalizer story all the way back from those in the 80s television series that it's based on and how he was going to modernize it, things like that. I thought Denzel Washington, even in this film too, really brings a lot to the Robert McCall character. I really like how he's this kind of a vigilante, but kind of not. He's kind of this guy that, kind of like Frank Castle from The Punisher, for those who know who that is. He deals with justice and punishment for those who really do need it, that really are not doing good things for society, but he's also giving, at least in the first two films, I feel he does this more than the third movie. He gives these bad guys a chance to change their lives around to make sure that they stop what they're doing. And if nothing happens, obviously he does something way, way worse and drastic to them to make sure that what they were doing was wrong. And so that's all stuff that has intrigued me over the course of this franchise. There's some things about that, like I said, that work well for the most part for this movie, but have worked better for the first two films. So let's go over some positives and negatives of what I liked about this movie. But at the end of the day, I think those first two Equalizer films are better. I think they're better directed films from Antoine Fuqua. And I'll also go over kind of why this film kind of feels the least connected to the earlier two films, while the two films feel like something you could do a double feature of, and it feels like a direct continuity of both of those. So for my positives of this movie, though, first and foremost, this is a continuation of that great Robert McCall character you knew from the first two movies. So if you like the way Denzel Washington plays the character, if you like the character in general, we do get another really good continuation of the Robert McCall character. He's still doing the stuff that you want him to do. You want him to take out these really terrible people over the course of the story. He is helping out people that are good and have good intentions and are just trying to retire peacefully, or in the case of Dakota Fanning's character, trying to work with the CIA and take on cases that are bigger than themselves, and they're getting the help that they need to get the case solved right. So it is a continuation of that great character that you love from the first two movies. Thankfully, that's not changed too much. There is a couple of things about the Robert McCall character, not so much on Denzel Washington's part, but how the script treats him, that I'm going to go over my negatives here in a little bit. But for the most part, this is a continuation of that character that you knew and loved from the first two movies and from the TV series, from those who really know a lot about the Equalizer. But a great continuation, and I love that we get to see another story with this character, once again played by Denzel Washington. This one I can't go into too much detail on, but for the most part, there's a character in this movie that has a special kind of reveal in the third act of this movie that has a overall connection to the franchise in general. It really is too bad that this reveal couldn't have happened earlier on in the story, so over the course of this film, you can kind of see how this compliment that this character gets from Denzel Washington at the end of the movie becomes even more relevant to us as an audience. But for the most part, there is a reveal and there is a connection that happens in the third act. There's also a connection in the third act as to why Robert McCall is even traveling in Italy to begin with, that I really liked. And it's just one of those things where I really wish kind of this reveal could have been happening earlier, just so by the time we really get into the plot of this movie, it really would have hit us much more emotionally and impactfully as an audience. But I do like that there is a reveal and a connection in the third act as to why things are happening the way they are, where Dakota Fanning fits into it, and I thought that aspect of the story was good. For the most part, there's not a lot of it, but when it does happen, I do feel like the action scenes are very well staged here. Um, Antoine Fuqua is good about making sure that you get to see what's happening in the action scenes, making sure that there's not too much shaky cam, or that you're basically being able to see what Denzel is doing in some of these scenes. So for the most part, it is a well staged action movie. Don't go into it just for the action though, because there is a lot of slow moments that I'm going to get into here in a little bit that really aren't too action heavy. But when the action is there, when you do see it happening, when Denzel does have to do something about this mafia, I do feel like the action scenes, for the most part, are very well staged. And overall, I do like this international Italian setting that this film takes this time around. I think he was even the second film. I think Antoine Fuqua said that he wanted to do something more internationally as far as where the Equalizer series was going to go. There was a small taste of that in the second movie, but this film we get to see him traveling abroad the whole movie. So it wasn't just a taste of it like we did in the second movie. So I do like the setting. I think it does bring a little bit of something to this franchise because, the third time around, you really do have to do something to keep things interesting and do something different with the franchise. There's a little bit of a taste of that. Once again, I want to use the word taste here. But for the most part, when that international / Italian setting is here, when it does something for the story, I thought that aspect of the story was well handled. And overall, I liked how the CIA got involved with Robert McCall in this story. It's one of those things where some earlier actions that he took get the CIA involved with what he's doing in Italy. I thought that was well handled. I thought how the CIA overall got involved with him, I thought was a pretty well handled portion of the movie as well. But for my negatives of this movie, though, you guys, there is some really, really slow scenes in this movie. There's just a lot of scenes where it takes a lot of time to get from point A to point B. It really takes its time going from those major points to the other major plot point of the movie. There's even a lot of scenes, and I get it, earlier on in the movie, Robert McCall is recovering from this injury that he gets earlier on in the movie, and I get it, you want to make scenes where he's recovering, he's kind of observing Italy, he's observing how terrible this mafia is, and I get it, you want to have scenes where you, the audience, and him as the character get to absorb everything that's going on within this place that he's staying at, but it really is very slow. There's just a lot of times where you kind of have to remind yourself that this is an action movie, and it really takes a long time to go from one major action scene to the next one. So I thought action-wise, they really could have probably used more action scenes because it is well staged when it happens. It's just a long wait to get there. And for the most part, there is a lot of scenes that really do feel very slow and kind of boring, to be honest. And overall, I thought the whole Italian mob story was extremely generic this time around. I thought, in comparison to the first two Equalizer movies, I thought this felt the least interesting as far as what kind of threat Robert McCall had to take down. Because in those first two movies, man, if you messed with that mob in the first movie, you were going to get hurt, you were going to get killed, you were going to have your family, they were going to do something to your family that you were going to really regret later on. In the second movie, when we find out who the villain is in that movie, man, do they know how to punish you, they know how to hurt you, they know how to really get at you. This time around, just like Robert McCall shows up and everything's fine. It's just that there really is no extra challenge to it. There's no, everything I just mentioned, I guess, kind of applies to this new mob as well. But the second Robert McCall is in there, the second he kind of gets to take care of business, it feels like it's just another day in the life for him, and there's just another round of people that he has to take out without any kind of problem at all. So this, out of all three of these movies, I thought this was the least challenging threat that Robert McCall had to face as a character. And I really thought that was too bad because this is the third time around. You really kind of have to go bigger with things now. And as a result, they kind of just go smaller with it now, really. And so I thought the whole Italian mob thing with the story was pretty generic and kind of boring, and really kind of not very threatening, to be honest. I also thought Robert McCall, a lot of his big characteristics that he had in those first two movies were kind of stripped away in this movie. One thing that they did in the first two films that they didn't even acknowledge in this movie is he's very book knowledgeable. So he knows a lot about things that happen in books. He quotes books. He quotes scenarios that happen in books that really kind of make him look at life at a certain way, and they completely drop that aspect of this character and this of the character this time around. There's no kind of him referencing a major book. There's no him referencing a major quote or character. And I really think that adds to certain scenes of the movie as to why he's doing what he's doing. And they completely drop that aspect of the character this time around. Another thing they didn't do in this movie that they did in the first two films is he has kind of a young character that's learning from him. So in the first film, he had Chloe Grace Moretz, who was in a bad lifestyle. He gets her cleaned up and gets her going to school and has her life kind of going in a better direction. In the second movie, there's a kid that's into art, but he's also involved with this gang. And so Robert McCall is trying to make sure that he doesn't choose the wrong life, that he does choose a life of art in school and doing the right thing. In this film, they don't really have that character this time around. I guess maybe Dakota Fanning learns a couple of things from him when she shows up in the movie, but it's definitely not the character arc or the intrigue that we got from those first two movies at all. Another thing too is her character is already in the right life and the right career and all that stuff. So it's just one of those things where by the time the film is over with, by the time there is some kind of an arc for him and this Dakota Fanning character, there really is no arc. It's just because she's already pursuing this life, she's already doing the right thing. There's really no like extra thing to be cleaned up in her life, really. So I thought that was one aspect of the story that was really kind of messy and a missed opportunity. It worked so well in the first two films, and I really kind of missed it this time around at the third film. Tried not to go down that route, but I get it. You want to do something different, but if you're going to do something different, do something interesting. And I just felt like the route that they took was not the interesting route. I also thought this film felt too small scale this time around. I know I briefly brought that up earlier, but it really does feel very small scale compared to the other two movies. They are going to Italy, they are doing something different, they are bringing an international flavor to the story, but as a result, you're making the story smaller by doing a gang that's not as threatening as the first two threats from those first two movies. You are doing something where Robert McCall is not doing as much. He's not being as involved with people's lives. It's just kind of small nods to some friendships that he's forming overseas. So I just thought it was a very small scale script that really could have gone bigger. The first two films went very big with certain things, and I thought this film this time around just didn't go big enough on certain things. And also, for the most part, what Anton Fuqua's films are interesting with is he has good guys, bad guys, and a middle ground of, okay, well, this person's good, but this aspect of their life is bad, and this person is bad, but this aspect of their life is good. And I thought out of all the Equalizer movies, this time around it felt the least relevant. It just felt like if you're a good guy, you're a good guy the whole movie, and if you're a bad guy, you're a bad guy the whole movie. There is just no middle ground in this movie. There's a lot of times, I mean, with maybe a couple of exceptions of Robert McCall's character doing some really terrible things to these bad guys, there's really no like middle ground in this movie. And I think that's one thing that the first two Equalizer films did so interestingly is there were good guys and bad guys, but there was aspects of their life that were both bad and good, and so it kind of put them in the middle ground at certain times of the story. This time around, it just felt a little too straightforward. It's just you're a good guy or a bad guy, nothing too special about it, no middle ground at all, and I thought that aspect of the story was kind of disappointing. But overall, I'm going to give Equalizer 3 a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's an okay film. I think you could rent it on a rainy day and have no problems with it. If you like the first two Equalizer films, it's not a bad way to go. But at the same time, this is a major drop in quality, I think. There's good things about the story. There's things that I like about it. But there is quite a few negatives here. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. It's okay. I would say rent this movie if you're going to check out Equalizer 3.